Part 1, The Discovery. I, 38M at the time, had been married to my wife Danielle, 36F at the time, for 11 years. We had 2 kids, Sophie, 9, and Ben, 6. I co-owned a mid-sized commercial HVAC installation company with my business partner and supposed best friend since college, a guy I'll call Rick. We were, by every outward measure, doing fine. Nice house in the suburbs, 2 cars, a lake cabin we'd bought 3 years earlier with the business doing well. Danielle didn't work. We'd agreed early on that she'd stay home while the kids were young, and by the time Ben started school she'd settled into a routine of PDA stuff, yoga, and figuring out what she wanted to do next, which had been the plan for about 4 years running. I never pushed her on it. I liked providing. I liked coming home to a house that felt like a home. The first crack showed up in the dumbest possible way. I'd left my laptop charger at the office and used Danielle's laptop to print a boarding pass for a work trip. Her email was already logged in. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that, because I know how these stories go and everyone assumes the guy was already suspicious. I wasn't. I was genuinely just trying to print a PDF. But autocomplete is a hell of a drug. I typed R into the search bar of her Gmail to look for receipts from the airline, and the first suggestion that populated was a thread titled Tonight, from an address I didn't recognize. Sent at 11:47 p.m. 2 nights before, when I'd been asleep upstairs after a long day, and Danielle had told me she was reading in the den. I want to say I hesitated. I didn't. I clicked it. It wasn't even coded language. It was explicit, casual, comfortable in a way that only comes from repetition. And it wasn't some rando from a dating app. It was Rick. My business partner. Best man at my wedding. Godfather to Sophie. The guy who'd been at my house for dinner probably 200 times over the past decade, who Danielle had always rolled her eyes about and called exhausting whenever he tried too hard to be funny at parties. I sat there in my home office at 6 a.m. with a boarding pass half printed and read 4 months of emails between my wife and my best friend. Turns out, exhausting was cover. It had been going on, per the timestamps, since at least February, 10 months by the time I found it in December. There were hotel confirmations. There was a whole secondary phone she'd apparently gotten for the PDA fundraiser committee that was actually just a burner for Rick. I did not confront anyone that day. I want to be honest about why. I was in shock, yes, but underneath the shock was something colder and more clear-eyed than I expected from myself. I run a business. I know that the person who reacts first in a negotiation is usually the person who loses it. This wasn't a negotiation yet. But some instinct told me it was about to become one, and I did not want to walk into it emotional and empty-handed. So I closed the laptop, printed my boarding pass, went to work, and did not say a single word. Part 2, Building the Case. I want to walk through what I actually did over the following 10 weeks, because I think this is the part people skip when they fantasize about revenge, the boring, methodical, unglamorous groundwork that makes the payoff possible. Revenge fantasies are made of the ending. Real revenge, if you want it to actually work and actually hold up, is made of paperwork. Step 1. I got a lawyer before I did anything else. Not a divorce lawyer initially, a consultation with a family law attorney in a state that is not a community property state, because I wanted to understand exactly what I was working with. I told her everything. She told me 2 things that shaped my entire strategy. First, in my state, marital misconduct like adultery generally doesn't affect the division of assets in a no-fault divorce, but it absolutely can affect things like alimony/spousal support determinations, and it can matter enormously for custody if I could show a pattern of the affair partner being around the kids or the marital home being used for the affair, or if I could show any dishonesty or financial deception tied to it. Second, and this is the part that mattered most, whatever happened, I needed documentation, not vibes. Screenshots I took myself of someone else's email, obtained without consent, could be legally messy to use directly depending on jurisdiction and how I acquired them. This varies a lot state to state and I am not going to pretend I'm an expert, I am just telling you what my lawyer told me. What I needed was independent, above-board verification. A private investigator. Financial records I had every legal right to as a co-owner of joint accounts. Anything that didn't rely on, I read your email, which Danielle could spin as an invasion of privacy and try to make about me instead of her. So that's what I built. Step 2, I hired a private investigator. Not a cheap one, not a guy from a late-night commercial. A licensed PI recommended by my lawyer who specialized in exactly this. I gave him nothing except, my wife is going out on Tuesday and Thursday evenings for book club and spin class. I'd like to know where she actually goes. I didn't tell him what I already knew. I wanted his findings to be clean and independent, uncontaminated by my own suspicions, so that if this ever needed to hold up to anyone, a judge, a mediator, my own conscience, it wasn't just husband already believed this and went looking to confirm it. It was neutral third party observed X, Y, Z on his own. Over 6 weeks he documented 4 hotel meetups, GPS timestamped photos of both cars at the same discrete hotel 80 minutes from our exit off the highway, never anywhere local, they were careful, or thought they were, and one dinner at a restaurant in a town neither of them had any reason to be in unless they were trying not to be seen by anyone we knew. Step 3, I quietly got my financial house in order. This is the part one thing people underestimate. If you're the spouse who's about to blow up a marriage, even if you didn't start it, you need to not be caught flat-footed financially the moment the blowing up happens. I opened an individual account at a bank Danielle had never used, in my name only, and began routing a portion of my normal paycheck, not hiding money, not draining joint accounts. This matters. Don't be an idiot and commit financial fraud in the middle of building your case for financial fraud, into it, the same amount every payday, clearly documentable, clearly traceable, clearly just. A guy opening a personal savings account, which is not illegal and which any lawyer will tell you to do. The moment you suspect divorce is coming, regardless of who's at fault. I also, and this took the most nerve, started quietly documenting Rick's use of company resources. Because here's the thing, Rick wasn't just my best friend. He was my 50-50 business partner. And once I started actually looking, instead of trusting him blindly like I had for a decade, I found he'd been billing personal expenses to the company card. Not huge amounts individually, a hotel here, a dinner there, gas for site visits, that didn't correspond to any actual jobs on our schedule, but they added up over the same 10-month window as the affair, to just under $14,000. Every single site visit that didn't check out correlated suspiciously well with the PI's documented meetup dates. He'd been using company money to fund the affair. Against a company I co-owned. That he owed a fiduciary duty to as a partner. That was no longer just a marriage problem. That was a business problem, with actual legal teeth, that had nothing to do with feelings and everything to do with contract law and partnership agreements. I hired a forensic accountant. Quietly. Through the business, using my authority as a co-owner to request an internal expense audit, which I had every legal right to request and which raised 0 flags with our office manager because partners request audits sometimes, that's normal business hygiene. By week 10, I had PI documentation of 4 in-person affair meetups over 6 weeks, GPS and timestamped. A forensic accounting report showing $13,800 in personal/affair-related expenses billed to the company by my business partner over 10 months. My own finances quietly squared away and legally clean. A family lawyer who'd reviewed everything and told me my position, if I wanted a divorce, was about as strong as it gets. A business lawyer, separately, who confirmed that Rick's expense fraud was a clear breach of our partnership agreement and could be grounds for forced buyout of his shares at a steep discount, or even termination for cause depending on the exact language. Ours was, thankfully, pretty airtight. I'd actually been the one to insist on strict language years earlier, which felt like a strange kind of poetic justice. And Danielle knew none of it. I had not changed how I acted at home even slightly. I still kissed her good morning. I still asked about her day. I still went to Sophie's soccer games and sat next to her on the sideline like everything was fine, because as far as she knew, it was. I won't pretend this part was easy. There were nights I lay awake next to her, this woman I'd built a life with, feeling something curdle in my chest every time she said, "I love you," before bed. But I kept telling myself, I am not the one lying right now. She's the one lying. I'm just waiting, gathering. And there was a strange, cold clarity to it that got me through, the sense that I wasn't spiraling, I was working. Part 3, the trigger. The thing that moved my timeline up was almost comedic in its pettiness, considering everything else going on. Danielle had been planning, for months, her 40th birthday party. Big one. Rented out a private room at a nice restaurant, 60-some guests, both our families flying in, the whole production. She'd been talking about it since September. This was going to be in early March. And Rick, my business partner, her affair partner, godfather to my daughter, was, of course, invited. Was, of course, expected to give a toast, because he was basically family. I sat with that for a while. The audacity of it. The idea that I was supposed to stand in a rented function room and clap while my best friend gave a heartfelt toast about my wife, at a party celebrating her, funded partly out of our joint account, while I already knew everything. And that's when the plan crystallized into something specific, instead of just eventually leave and eventually confront him. I decided the party was going to be the day. Not out of some petty desire for drama for its own sake, though I won't pretend that wasn't part of it, but because it was, tactically, the perfect moment. Every witness who mattered to both of our lives would already be in one room. Both families. Our friends. Rick's wife, Carol, who had absolutely no idea any of this was happening and who I'd grown genuinely fond of over the years and felt sick about what this would do to her, through no fault of her own. I moved my timeline up. I told my family lawyer the date. I told her I wanted the paperwork ready to be served, not just drafted, the morning after the party, because I wanted the confrontation itself to be verbal and controlled and mine, on my terms, in front of the people whose good opinion Danielle and Rick both clearly still wanted to keep. I didn't want to hand her papers at the party and turn it into a screaming scene in front of 60 guests and my own kids, who I'd arranged, deliberately, to have at my sister's house for a sleepover that night specifically so they would not be there for any of this. Instead I planned something quieter, and honestly, meaner, in the specific way that only something quiet and controlled can be mean. Part 4, the night of. The party was exactly what you'd expect. String lights, a slideshow of Danielle's life set to music, her mother crying happy tears during a toast about what a wonderful wife and mother she'd become. I stood next to her most of the night with my hand on the small of her back, smiling for photos, because that's what I'd trained myself to do for 10 weeks. Rick gave his toast around 9:30. It was, I'll give him this, a genuinely good toast, funny, warm, full of callbacks to old memories, the kind of toast that gets real laughs and a few tears. He raised his glass to one of the best people I know, and the whole room raised theirs back, and I raised mine too, and smiled, and did not break a single muscle in my face, because I'd had 10 weeks of practice. Around 10:15, when the dancing had started and people had a few drinks in them and the mood was loose and warm, I asked for the microphone that had been used for toasts. The DJ, who didn't know any better, happily handed it over, assuming I was going to say something sweet about my wife of 11 years on her 40th birthday. I want to be precise about what I said, because I'd actually thought about the wording for weeks and I did not want to say anything that could later be spun as me being the unhinged one, the aggressor, the one who ruined the party. I wanted every word to be calm, factual, and impossible to argue with. I said something close to this. Hey everyone, sorry to interrupt the dancing, I promise this will be quick. I just wanted to say a few words on Danielle's birthday, since apparently everyone else already has. Small laugh from the room. Good. Keep it light for one more second. 11 years is a long time. I've learned a lot in that time. I've learned Danielle likes her coffee exactly the temperature of lukewarm bathwater, which I still don't understand. I've learned she cries at every dog food commercial but not a single actual sad movie. And over about the last 10 months, I've learned some other things too, like that book club on Tuesdays doesn't actually involve a book, and spin class on Thursdays doesn't actually involve a bike, and that our lake cabin has apparently seen more of Rick this year than my kids have. The room went silent in that specific way a room goes silent when 60 people simultaneously realize they are watching something they will be describing to other people for the rest of their lives. I'm not going to make a scene, I continued, keeping my voice level. I'm not interested in screaming, I'm not interested in throwing a drink on anyone, and God knows I'm not going to ruin a nice party any more than it's apparently already been ruined for the last 10 months. I just didn't think it was fair that I was the only person in this room who didn't get to know what's actually been going on. So, now you all know what I know. Happy birthday, Danielle. I set the microphone down on the DJ table, picked up my jacket, and walked out. I did not see what happened after that, because I did not stay to watch it, on purpose. What I've since pieced together from people who were there and from Carol, Rick's wife, who called me sobbing 4 days later, is that the room fractured into chaos almost immediately. Danielle's mother, apparently, physically slapped Rick across the face, not knowing yet the full extent of it, just reacting to the word cabin, which meant something to her because she'd stayed there with us the previous summer. Carol left within about 90 seconds, in tears, and didn't speak to Rick for 11 days afterward, by her own account. Danielle reportedly tried to chase me into the parking lot, but I was already gone. I'd had a car service waiting outside for exactly this reason, because I did not want a single moment of, sorry, let me get my keys, that would give her the chance to catch me before I was ready to be caught. Part 5, the morning after. I hadn't gone home. I'd booked myself into a hotel 2 weeks earlier under a name that wasn't hard to find but wasn't obvious either, specifically so I would have somewhere calm to be that night and the next morning, away from whatever was about to detonate at the house. At 9 a.m. the next morning, a process server showed up at our house and handed Danielle divorce papers. Not vindictive papers, I want to be clear, my lawyer and I had built them to be aggressive but clean, full disclosure of marital assets already prepared, a custody proposal that was actually more generous to Danielle than she probably expected given everything. I did not want to fight over the kids as a weapon. I wanted my kids to have their mother, just not to have their father humiliated in the process, and this was the part I'd been waiting for, an attached notice referencing the forensic accounting report and putting her on formal notice that any assets traceable to marital funds used to facilitate an extramarital relationship would be a subject of discussion regarding equitable distribution and spousal support determinations. Simultaneously, at 9 a.m. sharp, my business lawyer and I met with Rick at our own office, before he'd even had time to process what had happened 12 hours earlier. I laid the forensic accounting report on the table between us. $13,800 in personal expenses billed to a business he had a fiduciary duty to. I gave him two options, per our partnership agreement's buy-sell provisions: agree to a forced buyout of his 50% stake at a valuation that accounted for, and subtracted, the misappropriated funds plus the cost of the audit and legal fees, or I would refer the entire expense report to the business's outside counsel and let them determine whether to pursue this as an actual breach of fiduciary duty claim, which could have gotten significantly more expensive and public for him than a quiet buyout. He took the buyout. Of course he did. He was staring down a fresh divorce threat of his own from Carol, a business fraud accusation, and a professional reputation in a fairly small regional industry where word travels fast. He signed the paperwork 9 days later. I now own 100% of a company that, this past year, did just under $6 million in revenue. Part 6, the divorce. I'm not going to pretend the divorce itself was some clean, satisfying montage. It took 9 months and it was genuinely painful in ways I hadn't fully braced for, mostly around the kids. Sophie asked me once, very quietly, in the car, why Uncle Rick wasn't coming to her birthday party anymore, and I did not have a good answer that a 9-year-old could hear, so I just told her plans change sometimes and changed the radio station, and then pulled over 2 blocks later because I couldn't see the road anymore. Danielle did not go quietly. There was an initial period of about 6 weeks where her lawyer tried to argue that the public nature of the birthday party announcement constituted some kind of intentional infliction of emotional distress, that I'd ambushed her, that I was the one who'd behaved badly by making it public rather than handling it privately. My lawyer's response, in essence, was, he found out about a 10-month affair, quietly built a legal case over 10 weeks without confronting anyone, filed for divorce through completely standard legal channels the very next morning, and simply told the truth, once, at a party, using no profanity and no physical confrontation, about facts that were independently verified by a licensed investigator. There is no cause of action for telling the truth calmly at a party. That argument evaporated fast. The financial side took longer to resolve, mostly because Danielle's lawyer kept trying to relitigate the value of the business, harder now that Rick was bought out and the ownership was cleanly consolidated under me, with clean books, post-audit, and because there was a real fight over the lake cabin, which Danielle wanted, and which I did not want to give up, both because I genuinely loved that place and because, I'll admit this part freely, I did not particularly want her bringing future partners to a place my kids associated with good childhood memories with me. In the end, I kept the business in full. I kept the cabin. Danielle kept the house, which was fair, because I wanted the kids to have stability in a place they knew, and I moved about 15 minutes away into a smaller place near their school. We settled into a 60-40 custody split, slightly in my favor on weekdays given her more limited work schedule flexibility at the time versus mine, which honestly reflected practical reality more than any kind of punishment. Spousal support was set at a modest, time-limited amount reflecting both the length of the marriage and, per my lawyer's argument, the documented misuse of marital funds to facilitate the affair, which the judge did ultimately weigh into the equitable distribution discussion, even though it's technically a no-fault state. Turns out, no fault, for the divorce itself doesn't mean a judge closes their eyes to a well-documented pattern of financial deception when dividing assets. Part 7, where everyone landed. It's been about 2 years since the birthday party now. Rick, last I heard through the small world grapevine of our industry, took the buyout money and tried to start a competing HVAC outfit about 40 minutes away. It struggled. Turns out a decent chunk of what made our old company successful was actually me, the relationships with commercial property managers, the bidding process I'd built over a decade, the reputation for reliability that I'd personally cultivated with 3 of our biggest recurring clients. He folded that business after about 14 months. Carol divorced him about 5 months after the birthday party. I actually still talk to Carol sometimes, not often, but she reached out about a year ago just to say she was doing well, had moved closer to her sister, and thanked me, oddly, for being the one who finally told the truth in that room, because apparently she'd suspected something for a while but had nothing concrete and no idea how to even start looking. I told her I was sorry it happened to her too. She said she was sorrier for my kids than for herself. I think about that a lot. Danielle is doing okay, from what I can tell through the kids and through the logistics of co-parenting, which we've actually settled into a fairly workable rhythm on, surprisingly. She's dating someone now, a guy the kids seem to like fine, which I'm genuinely glad about, because my kids being happy matters more to me than my ex-wife being miserable, whatever that says about me. We don't talk beyond logistics. There's no lingering warmth there, but there's also, at this point, not much lingering venom either. It's settled into something flat and functional, which honestly is about the best outcome anyone in this situation could ask for. The business did $6 million in revenue last year, like I said, its best year yet. I brought on a new junior partner about 8 months ago, someone I vetted extremely carefully and whose contract has language so airtight my lawyer joked she was going to frame it and hang it on her wall as a teaching example. Me, I'm remarried now, actually, to someone I met about a year after the divorce was finalized, completely unrelated to any of this, just through a mutual friend at a barbecue. She knows this whole story. She thinks the birthday party thing was, in her words, the single most controlled act of petty vengeance I've ever heard described out loud, and I choose to take that as a compliment. The kids are doing well. Sophie's 11 now and plays travel soccer. Ben is 8 and wants to be, depending on the week, either a marine biologist or a guy who fixes air conditioners like Dad, which I did not push him toward, for the record, but which I will admit filled me with an embarrassing amount of pride the first time he said it.